Now let's talk about Redux, which NGRX store, which we're going to be used, was based on. So remember when I had asked those very leading questions of like, what if we could do this? Wouldn't it be awesome if you could do this? So, classic salesman style, like, would you pay $10 if you could simplify your state management? Well, you're in luck. So with Redux, it comes with some fundamental core concepts that apply really well to Angular. So the idea or the tenets of Redux is that you have a single immutable state tree. That state flows down from that tree to the rest of your application. Events flow up, and there's no more managing parts of state in separate controllers and services. Redux is a library, so if I refer to the library done by Dan Abramov, then I will refer to that as Big R Redux. But for the rest of the workshop, I will probably refer to Redux the pattern, which is little r. And that is really important to see that not only is Redux a library, but it's a pattern that you can apply to just about any language. And so Dan Abramov, being just a really fantastic individual, has actually supported a lot of other efforts, including NGRX, outside of React, which he primarily works on. So speaking of Dan Abramov, I have some bit of homework for everyone, required viewing. So Getting Started with Redux by Dan Abramov. It's about 30 videos on Egghead.io. It will be forever free. And so Rob told me that when he built NGRX, he, over a weekend, I believe, sat and watched this series like 3 times and then went and built NGRX Store, rather. So this is a really great series. My favorite pieces of this was, I believe, about 17, 18, or 19. There's 3 videos, or 2 or 3 videos, where he talks about doing immutable operations. And so instead of using array.push, he starts talking about how you can use concat, slice, the spread operator, object.assign. And so he says, these are the things that we normally do. This is how you do it in an immutable fashion. That was amazing for me, that you can just switch your mindset a little bit and go from mutable operations to immutable operations. So single state tree, as it pertains to Angular, is we have our store, that's the center of the universe, and everything else just revolves around that. And so I really wrestled with how to visualize this, because everybody's like, well, wouldn't it make sense to just have a tree? Like, we're talking about a single state tree. And I think yes, but imagine that you're looking at a Christmas tree from the top. And so at the center of this, you have all these things around here. But then we turn this tree on the side, and we have state flowing from the store through the rest of your application. So state can then go to a service and to your component, which is these rings at the bottom. Or in very simple cases, you can pull state directly from the store, depending on what you want to do. But state is at the center of the universe in your store, and then it flows down. And by flow, it just gets pushed, and you never actually have to do anything other than make that initial query of like, hey, I'm interested in this thing, and give me an observable so that I know how it's working every single time. Same thing is that events flow up. So from your component, you can use store.dispatch and say, hey, this thing happened, take care of it for me. So you're constantly delegating work to your store and your reducers. So rather your reducers, we'll talk about that in a moment, but the events, the delegation of work always flows up. And so you never actually perform any kind of business logic on your application in the components, and rarely or as little as possible in your services, that everything flows up into this store that uses reducers to modify state and then bring it back down. So Gerard Sands, he is incredibly prolific, and I think we are both quite huge fans of Redux, NGRX, and reactive workflows is he has some really great posts. I'll add this into a final resources list, but he had a pretty good graphic that I think also illustrates this, that you have your view at the bottom. When something happens, you dispatch an action, which then gets consumed by the action, or so you actually dispatch an action, which then goes to a reducer for logic to be performed on it. New state is pushed into the store, and then it is then pushed back to your view. So this is really, I believe, Redux, the Redux reactive workflow in a nutshell. An action happens, it gets reduced into some state that gets passed on your store, that gets passed into your view.